Hello, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable today. It's titled Making Space, Empowering and Underrepresented Voices. And we'll start with a welcome to country by Phoebe.
We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which all of us meet. We recognise the continuing sovereignty of Aboriginal and First Nation peoples across the lands throughout which we work and campaign. We pay our respects to elders past and present, as well as all Indigenous and First Nations people present. We recognise that sovereignty was never ceded and that this was and always will be Aboriginal land. We ask listeners and participants to reflect on what they can do to encourage Indigenous self-determination. We stand in solidarity with Black community against all acts of racism, prejudice, violence and injustice. Black Lives Matter.
So our talk today is about making space. So we were formerly known as WiDGET, which stood for Women in Development, Games and Everything Tech, but we're transitioning to Making Space. Making Space is a not-for-profit cooperative support organization empowering minority and underrepresented people in game development and technology spaces to maintain and improve quality of life and facilitate the creation of their own diverse and interesting experiences. So this roundtable will feature some of our new board members as well as some of our friends from all over the world. So shall we get the ball rolling with a little bit of introduction?
Hi, I'm Amani. I'm from the Maldives and I'm there right now. I'm one of the board members of the organization and I'm involved in it because I lived in Australia for 5 years and I'm a game designer, artist, and I was working with a lot of people here before.
I am Creatrix Tiara, they, them pronouns, currently based in Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, Australia. I've been an independent creative shenaniganist for the last decade or so. I've been working with games, performance art, writing, activism, and a lot of my work often has to do with like speaking up about like the people who are left in the margins of the margins, whether it's like, you know, race, disability, nationality, sexuality, gender, you know, especially people who are multiply marginalized, and that comes through in whatever work that I do, including in the game space.
Daniella, for the purposes of this call, I'm a game asset artist and sort of general art journalist for a small studio in Malaysia.
Ida, I use they, them pronouns. I'm placed in Yogyakarta, which is also known as Montreal, and I have been involved. I'm from Copenhagen, and I have been involved with the Copenhagen Game Collective for a couple of years, and currently I'm doing a PhD, so that's less involved with the last couple of years. I've been less involved with the whole community aspects of things, but I'm still making stuff and yeah.
I'm Jess, they, them pronouns. Like Ida, I organize and work in Jojage or Montreal. I'm a designer, artist, and also do a lot of community org stuff with some people that are in this room right now. And I am also finishing up a PhD currently.
I'm Laura Palavecino. I am she, her. I am from Argentina. I am a video game designer, artist, and researcher interested in experimental games. I am currently finishing my master in electronic arts here in Argentina. And I am part of Women in Games Argentina, ACAWIGAR, and I am a mentor of Chicas en Tecnología, like Girls in Technology, here in Buenos Aires. And that's our both communities. We try to reduce the gap gender in video games and technology.
Maize, my pronouns are they, them. Based in Melbourne here with the Making Space crew. I specialize in game audio. I also help to run Non-Binary Zone, which is an online community of exclusively non-binary people. and I also am the Melbourne representative for Game Workers Unite.
And next, I have me. So hi, I'm Michelle. Pronouns are she, her. So I'm a game developer from Philippines and Taiwan. I'm currently doing my PhD in Melbourne, and I'm also one of the new board members of Making Space. And I'm also a Women in Games ambassador. And next we have Phoebe.
Pronouns are she, her. I'm also part of the Making Space team. I am finishing my final year of my bachelor's degree, so nothing fancy like a master's or a PhD yet. And I've done some work with mentoring Indigenous kids, and now I'm doing some work in like Indigenous game design stuff as well.
So I am a developer / producer from Perth. My pronouns are he, him. And I tend to work with I'm on the board for Making Space. I also work with Let's Make Games, which is a game advocacy community in Perth. I'm secretary of that organisation, and I'm also the director for Perth Games Festival. So through all those things, like I tend to push for a really heavy, diverse stuff. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sithe. I'm originally from Zambia, but I live and study in South Africa at the moment. I'm studying computer science. It's also my final year bachelor's thingy, kind of. So I've been in community organization since like about 2013 in Zambia, trying to run communities. And now I'm documenting an initiative, or I'm working on an initiative to document 1,000 African women in games. So I mostly work in the space of including African women in game development.
I'm Squinky. I use they, them pronouns. I've been making games as basically an art practice for like almost 20 years. Started pretty early. I've held position industry and academia and various community organizer type roles.
And what's the name of your pet?
It's Neko.
And last we have Amber, who is a game artist and generalist, and her pronouns are she, her, and she organizes women and non-binary in game space community in a country where LGBTQ identities are illegal, which is why she's representing herself as a duck. And she is the cutest member, second to Neko, on this panel. So I guess we'll just start with each of you telling us about your spaces.
WiDGET was a women-focused tech group, so it stood for Women in Development Games and Everything Tech. And we had some issues. We had some trans issues. We were definitely behind the curve as far as women's groups expanding out to be all marginalized gender groups, and we definitely lost people along the way. Some of us who are non-binary, I continue to be non-binary, got pretty burnt out as well also, and we lost some very cool non-binary and trans activists along the way, but finally expanding out. So thinking about who pushes back, what sort of countries where it is legal or illegal, it being such a large group with so many very experienced people as well, what responsibility do we have to help others, and how can we do that sensitively as well? I think this conversation with all of these amazing contacts is a really cool launch off for Making Space, and a very cool coming together of a lot of people who've been thinking about this sort of stuff for ages in a lot of different contexts. So I think that's really cool. It's really fun. Looking forward to it.
So the question about like what places you work in is a little bit fraught, at least from my experience. Because you have kind of the sort of the question of physical space. And I've been a migrant pretty much my entire life. I grew born and raised in Malaysia, but because my family is from another country, which doesn't even get a label in there, we were just other.
Represent.
We're like the bad other. We're like the Bangladeshis, which lowest of the low. So, always having to be filtered as an outsider, no matter how long I spent there going to government school and stuff, and then having moved to Australia, moved to the US for a spell, came back to Australia, the idea of having like a kind of a permanent place or a consistent place is very strange to me. And like, I feel like the only place that's really consistent is like the internet. It was because of the internet, but I managed to find all the other spaces, from fandom spaces to like, as a very isolated queer kid who couldn't quite understand what queerness was, is finding other people who were chill to chat with, and then like finding like, people who actually cared and being able to see them in person. But also, besides the kind of physical space, in terms of like the kind of work that I do, because I travel between forms so much, it's kind of sometimes a bit of a whiplash going from like one thing to another. Like, I'd be pretty intensely working at Circus Oz once a week because part of my practice is performance, and I had like a big stage magic project for the last couple of years called Queer Lady Magician. And then going from that, so where a lot of people don't quite understand all my game references or internet references, the one who shows up at Circus Oz with a laptop all the time, what you're working on, to like then going to somewhere like say Freeplay, where it's mostly games people, and try to have to explain like theater or like, we have to like work out ticketing for this, and then like, have to equate and work with this venue, and then like trying to like almost like code switch into places and yet somehow holding it on. It's like, like I find for myself, like I work best in kind of where they all intersect and find interesting ways that they go together. And I get excited for when other people also can do that. Like, oh my God, you would have the same interest. But I also observe sometimes people any which way are just like, the techies, I don't appreciate art. We don't want to deal with this terrible technology. We are true artists who work everything on paper. And it's like, the artists are like, all don't understand how to be modern. They're all outdated. I'm just like, both of you. God.
This is a really important question because it makes me take stock of like my capacity and where my energy is going. So I feel like it's hard to like turn off that like mode sometimes. But the primary spaces that I organize in are like queer games. So Squinky and I are just two of the co-organizers of the Queerness in Games Conference, QGCon. And then working in a university, I don't know what other folks' experience is like, but like universities are like real bad, at least as bad as like the tech industry in terms of inclusivity and such. So like I do a lot of work there in my community, and then I also like realize how little capacity that already leaves, and then try to like help out with Game Workers Unite and unionizing, so that when I leave academia, maybe the games industry will be like a little bit better. That's me in a nutshell these days.
The spaces that I'm kind of in the moment, I guess I feel really lucky. I've just ended up around people who are very inclusive, are very open. I'm working in a small team now, Dragon Bear Studios, and they're working really hard to implement Indigenous culture into their fantasy-inspired games. So that's part of my role. I think that's just been awesome, because I know there are a lot of spaces that is really tiring for people and really difficult to be in. And I think I'm kind of coming into the industry where things are starting to shift. I know it'll still be out there when I do eventually move in, but hoping to surround myself, in the good, positive spaces around the people who are going to make those changes.
Awesome. So I'm kind of like in the same boat as Tiara. I'm also a third culture kid. So I'm Taiwanese. I grew up in the Philippines, where one of my first jobs in the industry is in the Philippines. And after I moved to Taiwan, like working in the game industry there was, I'm literally the only female programmer in the entire team. And the only time where there was another female programmer was because I actively, because we have like a job site where everyone who's looking for a job, they would have their resumes there. So that kind of gives you a gauge of everyone who wants to be in the industry are there. And I literally go through the filter looking for diverse people. At that time, I was working for Mattel, as in I make Barbie games. So obviously, I want to have more representation. And it was so hard for me to find someone. And it always had that feeling like, okay, I'm always going to be the odd one out. Like even going to game jams there is probably just my group that's a little bit diverse. Like, okay, we're like women, and it's literally all men. And after that, I moved to the UK, and that's how I got involved with the Women in Games Ambassador program. And they also have another program called the STEM Ambassadors. So I got involved with that, and I would go to schools and talk to young girls and kids who are exposed to like people who look like them are more likely to pursue that. So that has been like my shift. Like I realized that from a hiring perspective, I couldn't make much change because it's like a funnel. If nobody's going through that funnel, like there's no. So I realized I need to go go younger. So that's what I've been doing. Like when in the UK, I was talking to high school kids. And after I came to Australia, now I'm teaching 6-year-olds how to code. And not exclusively girls, but just like girls, boys, because they're at that age where they don't see stereotypes. They're not aware of it yet. So at that little young age, and I'm teaching them how to make games. Like most of them make games with Elsa and like Anna, and that's cute. And I really like how their eyes literally light up when they see something they made come to life. And that just brings me joy because like I feel like to address that problem, we can't address it from like an industry place. We have to go down. Like the younger they are, we have to get into their heads, tell them like, this is a space for you. Like if someone that looks like me, I'm so happy to see everyone in this group because like we're so diverse and like young kids need to see this.
I just realized with my whole intro about WiDGET turning into making space, I forgot about my own sort of reaction against WiDGET, which happened like very soon after I got on the board, was make non-binary zone, where there are no cis-identifying people and no binary trans identifying people, so just non-binary people. And it was a reaction of being lumped in with women, of like women and non-binary. So many of my non-binary friends would not be included in those spaces, but I so obviously was, and it was making me really uncomfortable that people would treat me like a woman, you know, and just try and lump it in like that. And non-binary zone grew really, really quickly, and we started working with like state arts departments and things like that. And yeah, it being online means that we have a lot of people from all around the world, but it being just non-binary people, I think, has really opened up a lot of space for people to talk about things and to observe each other as well, just living. Yeah, that was it.
I wanted to talk about my experience with spaces, I guess, from Zambia and South Africa. So when I first started hosting game development workshops, it was kind of like out of my own interest, and also the organization I worked for at the time, a tech and business incubator, they were encouraging me to host events and like do whatever I wanted. So I wanted to host game development events. And even though I knew a lot of women who were really interested or who just seemed like they would be interested in this stuff, they didn't show up to the spaces. So it was always like 1 or 2 women, including me. So I decided to host women exclusive game development workshop, and it was just kind of to increase participation. That was the only goal. The only goal was to increase participation. But then, like, from the first workshop, like, this has been my favorite event ever. Perspectives which I had never heard, and it was like people who I would see all the time, who never talked about gaming or game development. They started talking about it, and they had so many things which they would never say out loud, like in front of everyone else around them. And they said because they don't feel, they said that they don't like the way guys treat them when they talk about games. So then I realized, wow, there really is a need to create that kind of space for people to talk freely about that. And also, like, there's no visibility really for African women. At the time, there was no visibility for African women gamers and African women in game development. Kind of to this day, it's still really low. And when I moved to South Africa, so in South Africa, I found a lot of women in games and all that stuff. Oh, by the way, also, so in Zambia, it's illegal to be LGBT. So yeah, that's illegal. But in South Africa, they are more liberal. And like, so from a culture where, that was kind of like not so comfortable for anyone who wasn't a straight guy, then coming to South Africa and finding the games, the game industry or game development scene embraces people of diverse, they embrace people of diverse gender representations, but there is still a very big problem with race. So jumping from one space with this kind of problem to another space with this kind of problem. So that's why I'm really interested in hearing about what's happening all over the world, because the thing is, it's like you never really know what problems you'd face if you jump to another country, like just even like a country away, because if I had a queer friend in games in Zambia, they could take a flight to South Africa and they might enjoy the benefits of being more free to express themselves, but they might experience other types of discomfort being Black, because even though South Africa is a majority Black country, the game development industry there is definitely mostly white. Yeah. So, yeah, and that's why I'm working to document 1,000 African women in games. It's to work against that. But we also accept, just anyone who identifies as a woman. I would like people to share their experiences. So this is a new online space that I'm working on that I'm hoping can kind of show people what everyone experiences in different places. We're just beginning, but I hope it gets bigger. Yeah.
So I mentioned it previously with my intro, but most of the work that I do in regards to community is with Let's Make Games. And Let's Make Games is an organisation with lots of little things happening. My role in all that is as a lead event manager. And so I manage the Game Festival, though it'll be my first time this year. We were hoping to do it in person, but with the current pandemic, it's not happen. So we are doing that online here. And with that comes a whole host of, we wanted to get diverse voices in here. We wanted to pay them for their time. We wanted to make sure everyone was being represented. It wasn't just a cost fest. How do we make sure that it's happening and it will still happen in this online space? These are all good questions. And it's interesting because it's not just me. I've got like a board of people helping manage it, but every person's voice. So it's not just me with my opinions throwing, ideas to the wind and going, well, I reckon that this will work because, I know everything type attitude. My opinion is that I should listen to other people. Yeah, I think when I came out as trans, I had to understand that I was no longer speaking from the female position. And that also meant taking a step back and listening to other people's voices than I was. So that means like listening to voices from other sides of the or other race questions. That means that I need to tone it down and let them sort of bring their voice forward.
I'm half Filipino and half Iranian, and I was born and raised in Canada. And I'm also trans and autistic and didn't know those things for the longest time. Making video games has been one of my most enduring special interests. So like a lot of my work in communities has mostly been for the like ulterior motive of like making myself feel more represented. And I'm just like, I mentioned in chat that I wanted to talk about time as well as space. Time has, like, I think back to when I first started getting into making games and finding community with people making games, and how it was mostly like, I was just a teenager on the internet. And so like, I didn't really have to talk about like my gender or race or any like physical like characteristics of existing as a body in a space. But then like as I got a bit older and started to like have to work and get jobs and go to conferences and stuff, like I feel like I have had this abusive relationship with the game industry for a very long time. Like when I was perceived to be a young woman of color, I was like, I experienced what can only be described as love bombing, diversity initiatives, like kind of just try to like, even back in the mid 2000s, like lots of diversity in games initiatives were popping up, and kind of like, I thought that I was like capitalizing on something and gaining an advantage, but really they were just taking advantage of me and other young people like me, which is like what they do all the time. It's weird. A lot of my work in communities has been this this simultaneous like self-discovery of who I am, and through that finding the other people like me and gathering us together to share our experiences. So that is like really like, it's like why I care about community stuff. Like, yeah, to first of all, figure out who I am and then find all the other people like me. And I feel like that's been a net positive, I hope.
Yeah. And we have another last minute addition to our roundtable, Marie Claire. Is it okay if you introduce yourself?
It was wonderful hearing from people. My name is Marie. I'm also saying something about communities, is that right? I'm saying, I really like what Squinky just said about discovering oneself, or like what I read of what Squinky just said. It's all hard to know what you hear versus what I said, but about kind of like discovering oneself while discovering communities. I've worked in communities for a very long time, and I guess lately I've been, but lately, as in like the last 10 years, I've been wondering more and more about how we make space, how we build space without reinforcing like this garbage that's already here. Yeah, how to kind of like fight for space and resist for space, and that's the question I'm thinking about a lot right now. It's really amazing to see everything.
Yeah, I just wanted to also give my affiliations, I guess. So I was part, or is still, I guess, part of Copenhagen Game Collective, and I used to be in Copenhagen. And then part of what happened was that I had to move away. I had to move away from Copenhagen due to some gender-based violence, basically. And although I now would be safe going back, I have kind of settled in another place. So, I have kind of two geographical locations that I tie myself to. And so Copenhagen being one of them that I can speak to. And that is, it's a bit awkward being abroad, but still being part of Copenhagen Game Collective. But also what is happening is that it's not a very, I mean, there's some work to do in terms of making that space. It's just not it's not a space that is very good at taking care of marginalized positions. And that is a little bit disturbing. I mean, part of me just want to like leave it and be like, yeah, okay, I got other spaces, thank you. But then I also know people in Copenhagen who, like POC and queer people who don't feel comfortable around this collective, and they are quite dominating in terms of making community and making parties. So that makes me and I mean, we are a couple of people who feel like, okay, this is an opportunity to try and do something and try and influence this space. But it's very complicated to do from abroad. And I don't think so far we've been very successful. Yeah, things are always changing, I guess, and it might also change again. And then I'm also here in Georgiage, in Montreal, and that's complicated for other reasons. Just because me as a foreigner here, I had to spend a lot of time learning the local politics, because the local politics are extremely complicated in terms of Quebec versus Canada, Indigenous peoples, different communities, cultures. So I've just spent a lot of time trying to understand what the local logics are of how things work, and so mostly I find myself being a supporter of spaces and not really being like the one who goes and hosts too much. And awkwardly, because I had so much violence targeted at me in Copenhagen, I find that academia is like a refuge for me, which is pretty fraught considering how hostile academia is to most people, or to a lot of people. But I'm very lucky to be part of spaces like what Jess is part of making. So I have very good people around me at my university, and also the queerness community in Montreal is really hosting very nice spaces that I enjoy. I think that's it for my community.
In Argentina, in general, we face a lot of troubles regarding racism, also about Black people and Indigenous people, and violence coming from the police, for example. I just want to mention that. And we have here a lot of violence against women, and of course about against queer people and non-binary people. But I am going to talk about my experience as a woman here in the video game industry. I work in the video game industry here. Hopefully I have the chance since 10 years ago. And what experience is that, especially in my place, as sometimes when I started, we were just few women. Now we are more. I'm going to talk about more later. But I feel myself like as a woman. Sometimes, most of the time, it's very hard to express yourself in a space that where you are highly sexualized. For example, sometimes in very subtle ways. Sometimes it's like you receive much attention. Sometimes it's regarding that your opinion is not considered because your point of view and interest doesn't fit exactly with the expectation of some traditional approaches coming from the video game field is very controlled by commercial expectations. And even if I have been working a lot since 10 years ago, it's hard for me to express my opinions because I don't like to play in the traditional video games or the traditional genres. So I have to move by my way to try to research about more experimental games and art. I have made a lot of studies about art. I am an artist, and it's going very well for me now. But it's always about to fight to discover yourself. What you want to say to the world. What do you want to communicate? How to reflect about what are you communicating, what are you trying to offer a critical point of view, always about trying to visibilize not just non-binary people or another point of view about different social issues, but even about the nature, about the non-human. And that's what I'm trying to do now. Fortunately, here we have some spaces like some video games festivals as Game On, where you can display your video games about artistic concerns or about a lot of issues about poetry, about art. And it's very important here too, one initiative that started the year before, which is Women in Games Argentina. I mentioned before when I presented myself. And this is like a community, and we are discovering that we are a lot of girls making games here in Argentina, not just video game developers, that we make art, design, or programming, but also we are musicians, we are lawyers, we are marketing people, we are streamers, researchers, and for us it's very important to gather together and keep a close communications in order to give us support us. That is a very good initiative, and also fortunately here we have a very strong movement called Ni Una Menos, No One Less. It's like a big field, a big context where we are a lot of organizations from different parts of view. Sometimes Ni Una Menos is more about a social moment. Women in Games Argentina is just about video games, but it's also Chicas en Tecnología, Girls in Technology, and I mentor there too, and we help very young people to enter in the technology industry from the high school level, because we think that's the key moment to internalize the girls about the importance of being involved with technology. There are also another community like Las de Sistema, the Girls of Systems. And well, we are not so good now because we face a lot of violence, but we are moving forward, and that's important.
So again, it's really intimidating hearing everyone's story because I think by comparison, I don't know if I could say that I'm actively involved in any advocacy group or the contribution to a space. I'm support adjacent is one thing that I might say. I think maybe a bit of a basis for this is I'm genderqueer, but mostly out of convenience and because I don't have any particular dysmorphia. I present male, and so a lot of the spaces which I have access to are male dominated, and I go under the radar in that regard. And you can sort of, even as somebody who has that level of access, you can sort of feel the hostility towards non-binary people and women in the industry. I think the team that I work with right now, it's a small team, but for as long as I can remember, it's been entirely male, which is, I mean, it's not been particularly bothersome, but you can feel the limitations about the kinds of things that you can talk about, the kinds of things that you can suggest, and the kinds of projects that you can pursue. And I'm actually pleased. It's nothing formal, but I'm actually really pleased that recently I began working on an informal project with a group that's entirely female, and the difference is visible. Suffice it to say, just like the areas that are explored and like how certain things don't get shot down, and it's really, really pleasant. In terms of how this sort of scales large, I think I have no problem sort of expressing that I am of a non-heterosexuality, and like I basically am out to friends and family and to certain colleagues, but there is always that question of like, oh, do I want to engage that question here? Because I think the standing idea is, if you bring that up, it's like, wait, this is not a real problem. Could you be quiet and let us talk about other real things? And so it's gotten to a point where I don't really sort of like let on unless it comes up organically. But yeah, I suppose that's sort of the state that I work in with regards to that. But in other respects, my team has chosen to work on a bunch of projects that are sort of very, like, we attempt to be very locally, culturally representative, which is nice, because I think there's, even in the local indie game industry, right, there's a strange emphasis on things being marketable across the world, and usually that means Western marketable. So you're seeing a small spike in people going, no, wait, there's a lot of like good content that has its basis here, and we should be leveraging that, and that's encouraging to see.
I'm gonna read a statement from Amber. So she said, as mentioned before, she runs a women and non-binary folks in games community, but since LGBTQ identities are illegal in her country, she has to run the organization as a women in games as a front and privately reach out to non-binary and queer folks to join them. But even running as a women in games organization is weird because they have cis men telling them how to represent women and how she should do better. And it echoes a lot of what Laura was saying. And the flip side is too that the org might appear to be inclusive to folks who are from other countries, like for appearing to only include women, with good intentions, of course. But there's always that internal struggle for visibility and also to protect herself and the community. Next, let's talk about being a token. I just lean in because I'm like, oh, if they want to give me a scholarship because I'm a woman in tech, like, who am I to deny that? So I have had a lot of like opportunity. Like, I was able to go to the UK because I was awarded a women in tech scholarship, and I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I got this because I'm a girl. But
on the one hand, I totally get it, especially in a situation where income is hard to come by and your options are already limited. But like at the same time, I have just faced so much violence being that token, like I get hired in and it's like, oh, it'd be so good to be diverse and so on. And then I just get treated so cruelly. And it ends up being like, oh, is this even worth it? The way I'm being treated right now, it's like you hired me and you won't listen to me. But then at the same time, no one else is, It's like, I can barely get any sort of work for anything that has nothing to do with what people think my identity is. Just like I have other skills. But yeah, no one seems to see beyond like, oh, you have good hot takes. We will praise you for the hot takes because that's the only thing you're valuable for. And like it's getting to, and then even in spaces where it's supposed to be for like people like me, whatever the like me is supposed to be, there's always something. There is always something where it's like, no, you're not good enough for this space. You know, like can't really do much in Malaysia, but even in the progressive spaces, the fact that I'm Bangla means I'm the automatic enemy. You know, I've had to fight off so much. We're talking about like non-binary spaces here, but I don't look the typical non-binary life, you know, so even then people like, what? Or it just whatever, like, oh, you go, like, but you didn't grow up here, so you don't know what it's like to be a person of color growing up in Australia because you migrated as an adult, you know, it's I get to the point now, and I'm sort of feeling this more and more in the past year, especially in the last few months with every social or career kind of circle collapsing on itself. I'm just so tired. I am just so tired, and I feel like I've been hitting a reset anyway because, you know, it took me so long and so much energy to work to a point where I'm on parity with everyone else because visa stuff hamstrung me for so much. And I've only just gone to the point where I'm trying to deliver, and then COVID-19 knocked that out. And now suddenly I'm like back to square one, and all the overqualified people are also competing for the tiny, tiny things. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to throw everything to the air. I don't care anymore. I'm just going to send this grant application in 5 minutes. I'm not going to care about trying to like satisfy their language or pitch them something that fits their needs. It's like, I'm tired. I'm just going to, this sounds like fun. Sure. And like, it's kind of weirdly working in a way. Like there's something where just like, you thought this was a good idea. Okay, great. Cool. And it has nothing to do with who I am as a person or my identity or my trauma. Just like, this is a cute idea. Oh my God, it's working. Ooh, okay. That's like it goes from like being the token and be like dealing with so much violence around it. Just like, I'm just gonna be whatever.
So this is exactly why I call it an abusive relationship, because like it's like you get love bombed and then you get discarded. And it's like
yep.
It's so weird. It's like they will act really, really excited to have you there, and then just like not care about you at all. Or be like actively hostile towards you. Yeah, it is so weird. And so part of the reason that I work as a freelance diversity consultant is like, it's like, obviously I have all of this experience, and I legitimately I would like to think I'm legitimately decent at doing diversity consulting, but also I do it in part so that I stop doing that work for free. Or so that I'm more mindful of when I choose, it's like when I choose to do this work. Because I often found myself in positions where I was like being expected to do that work for people for free and also not have that work be valued at all. It's like, and kind of like framed as like, it's like, in fact, we're doing you a favor, letting you tell us how to be more inclusive.
Is that like, oh, we're giving you this privilege for telling us what's good for you and like listening. Yes, that's fantastic. So it's assumed that it's such a big deal that like, oh no, but we didn't immediately shoot you down.
Right. Yeah. So I'm very exhausted. I have been like professionally in games for like almost 15 years, but a lot of people don't notice because I haven't really like held any senior positions anywhere or anything like that.
just like listening to everyone's situation, I've totally seen all of these. It's like this really weird like situation where we're just like Michelle, like totally lean into it. Like we're getting these scholarships, we get to go overseas. It's like, why wouldn't we? Like we're getting given this opportunity, let's take it. But again, it's also like, is that doing them like this really weird favor that's like really this like disadvantage for us? Like we're totally just like supporting like their tokenistic like tick box of who we are. So like if we weren't in that space, like we could totally use it as a space to encourage more people to be there and like push for those positions. So it's for a lot of people this really strange gray area. It's like, do I lean into this? Is that giving them more power? But also, who am I to not take this opportunity because it's really great for my own like career as well? So
yeah, this sort of like going in being like that stepping stone for other people to be able to have opportunity. I find it such a mixed bag because sometimes it works out that way, but too many times either it comes at a cost to myself, like I get super burnt out and, you know, completely abused, or, you know, like the love bomb is cooking was talking about, or it doesn't actually happen. It's like, oh, well, we thought you'd make more diverse, but you're too much of a nuisance, so we're just not going to try anymore.
So what I wanted to add was that, like, for me, so much of community organizing, like in the present moment, other than like, you know, actively going to protests and, you know, doing that anti-oppressive work, is kind of negotiating what people need to survive right now. So even though like we don't necessarily want to represent our organization as like something other than it is, even though like we know like, you know, it would be really wonderful if like we could just say like forget all these corporations that are giving us diversity money. Like so much of the work is like kind of like refunneling or diverting or subverting that. And I think that's like a really queer thing, right? Is that like, it's like, yes, like I will take your money and I will do things that you didn't expect with it. Or like, yeah, negotiating those spaces that we need, like those things that we need in order to like survive the present moment, so that like we can like continue the work, or that we can help other people continue their work. So like, yeah, like when I say take the money and run, I actually mean like take the money and like run in a completely different direction than like what was expected of you. Or like, yeah, and like, so it's kind of like, do they get to write it off and be like, oh, look, like we ticked this box and we like did this really good thing for people. Like, it's really shocking how little you have to promise a corporation for them to like give you what seems like a pile of money to me. And so like, I guess I feel like it's helpful to recognize that there are contradictions in like this work. I kind of have to like negotiate to make these spaces as like safe as possible for as many people as possible, and as helpful for as many people as possible for what they need right now, so that we can like look forward as well. Yeah.
You have to really know how people are taking advantage of you and see what is happening. And I think you take a long time to learn those things. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I have like, Ida and I, we've been discussing how white Denmark is and like all the stuff that was done. But, you know, it takes a while to realize what was going on at certain times as well.
The whole of Africa, I mean, there are 54 countries, and most of them have laws against homosexuality and general homophobia and transphobia. So on my website, but all those countries, they really love hearing about, oh yes, let's empower women and all that stuff. So yeah, so, and I think this also kind of plays a bit into the other conversations people are talking about right now. So it's like, yeah, I have to run it as a front for women, even though I do I would like to feature more trans women. We already have a trans woman featured on the site, and they did present themselves that way. And yeah, so letting people represent themselves however they want. Because the thing is, like, I know the people who support me, even if they're from like one of the most homophobic whatever countries or whatever, they're probably not going to read it. So it's like yeah, you know, accepting the support. It's a weird thing because like all over Africa, homophobia and transphobia are super rampant. Like, I mean, last year at the end of the year, there was just a couple got sentenced to 15 years in prison in Zambia, consensual gay couple, but they just got pardoned though. But it wasn't like they got specifically pardoned. It was like an African Freedom Day celebration, and then they pardoned like 2,000 people. But yeah, you can see like the laws there are some really colonial era laws, and people love to like, you know, use Christianity as a weapon against people. But the one thing which all Africans will agree on is supporting women. So that's kind of like how I have to market my initiative to fellow Africans, so that they can support that. And I mean, if they one day find out that, hey, there's someone gay on the website or whatever, I'll just be like, always been there. I mean,
like in Maldives, it's also illegal. And I was thinking about maybe trying to find some people to join this talk, but I think I'm on this very inclusive chat and this organization, but I don't know if I will be putting people in trouble, getting people in trouble, like trying to find people who are here. You know, I haven't been living here for a long time, and I've been in places where people are much freer. But even like even trying to be tolerant, even talking about being tolerant here, you can get banned and attacked, and you know, vigilantes can come after you and things like that. You can get killed also. So that's even talking about tolerance, right? So it is kind of impossible to also, not impossible, but I couldn't really decide what would be the right thing to do, if I should like reach out and try and find some people or not. So.
Something that Sithe was talking about how like a lot of these laws in countries where homosexuality is illegal, or just like basically non-heteronormative sexualities are illegal. Here it's also illegal, but I feel like most people are kind of chill to ignorant about it, and you get this impression that in a bunch of places, right, where it all comes down to these really, really archaic laws.
It's laws, and then laws are different from the way people are
as well, right? Basically, and it's really upsetting because you have these laws that come from such a long time ago that don't represent how most sensible people would think about this right now, and there's like a little bit of a sort of a perpetual motion machine, I think, going on, where people who have a little bit of discomfort with that, they latch onto this and use this as an excuse to be more hateful.
Section 377 is the law in just about almost every ex-British colony country that criminalizes homosexuality. It's like the same number. And so there's a lot of movement, like the Indian movement for like decriminalizing homosexuality was repealed Section 377. Singapore also had a recent, like sort of a similar campaign. So basically, the law that criminalizes homosexuality in ex-British colony countries is Section 377. It's the same number. Yeah. And so there's if you look up a lot of like movements around that, if you just Google like Section 377, you'll find like a lot of movements around it.
Circling back to the talks about colonization, because like inclusivity is not just about gender, it also covers race.
I feel pretty torn between like feeling fortunate that my parents migrated from like less like very less queer friendly places to Canada, where like if it weren't for me being Canadian, I probably wouldn't have been able to like transition or be open about my identity at all or anything like that. And it has improved my quality of life greatly. Just judging from like how awful it felt to be closeted and have to like hide parts of myself for a lot of my life. But then also like contending with the whole colonialist legacy of Canada and like it's like being on land that was stolen from Indigenous people and like where like so many human rights abuses are still occurring. And that's like really hard to grapple with a lot of the time. And I have a lot of feelings about it, and it's hard to put them into words sometimes.
I don't know. It's really difficult for me because I never really want to out myself, I guess. It's very difficult to even like, I don't know. I grew up quite not ashamed, like I never really spoke about my culture. I was kind of embarrassed. It was more so, and I never really wanted to do those kind of conversations because I never felt like I could speak enough about it. I think I just hit a generation where the major impacts didn't really directly affect me. And I grew up with my non-Indigenous half of my family who always supported and pushed my culture. It wasn't like they were like suppressing or anything, but I wasn't fully surrounded by it. So I guess I missed out a lot of stuff kind of associated with all of that.
It's actually funny that you should mention that because, yeah, that's kind of exactly where I am because sort of a running joke between me and my partner is that my family on my dad's side, they're all Sinhalese, but they want to be white. And I think that's sort of in terms of like the sort of knock-on effects of colonialism, right? My dad went to university in the UK, and he sort of like he came back with a very you could feel that his outlook was very shaped by that. Not necessarily like in both good ways and bad ways. Like he saw firsthand how people are marginalized, but he also picked up some of that classist attitudes that you get over there. And just from the get-go, I feel for my entire childhood, I was positioned that I never really soaked up any of, or not any, but I never really soaked up that much of what was happening in my own country, which is why I barely speak the local language. I think I can understand it, but I don't really. I was taken out of school at the 4th grade and homeschooled, so there was like more isolation going on there. And what ended up where that landed was just a position where it's like, oh yeah, I do think that there should be more people representing cultures that are not Western or just anything else. But then again, when I go back to it, I'm like, I'm kind of the worst person to speak about it because I have to research my own background, and like you shouldn't. Like, there's this thought in your head, which, oh, if I were being honest, you shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, I 100%. It's like this role. Like I've only just like recently in the last year when I've started really leaning into culture, into games, is when I actually like wholly believed like how proud I was of my culture. Like again, I was never like fully ashamed, but like now I'm so like I will do like things for it, and I will like make the effort to make it more accessible to people. But I'm in this position where it's like I was never that interested as a kid. I didn't want to know about it.
Lost.
Exactly. It's like so now I do have to do that research. And I was lucky to have someone like my father who was continuously like trying to push it onto me. And I was like, like that. I'm not interested. Like, I'm an angsty, emo teenager, and I've got other things to worry about rather than supporting and not losing a culture. And I look back on it, and I was like, oh, I really should have paid more attention. Like, yeah.
This was just like a side comment, but yeah, so like I feel like I don't have the access to my culture that I would want. Like, and yeah, that's it. Just it hurts a lot. Yeah.
I think what hurts more is not just the restriction of the access, but the sort of having to grow up in an environment where it's invalidated and delegitimized. It's not just, oh, where are you going to find out more about this? It's more thinking, okay, this is something that we're trying to get away from that. Don't look back. And even much later, for me personally, when my parents were like, oh no, we have to hold on to this. And I'm like, hold on to what? I don't even speak that language because you never taught me. You actually actively sometimes said that, no, we should speak English in the house because that's the language of commerce and that's the language of the world. And it's like, that may be true, but there's and I think that's maybe one of the less extreme cases in a lot of, I think in a lot of Tamil households, you can sort of see that I don't want to call it erasure, but an emphasis on like, okay, we don't want to be like the other Indians. And it's it feels so bad that it gets said a lot more than it gets challenged, especially in places like Malaysia, which is sort of like it's a seemingly cosmopolitan country, but there's room for all of this, there's room for that kind of like low-key, not particularly aggressive attitude for stuff like this.
Kind of tie it back into like the games industry in specific, although my example is still fairly general. But hearing about people who migrated for work or for life or for school, one thing that has really made too much of an impact on the kind of spaces I could occupy or be participating in is visas. My entire life was ruled by visas and therefore by visa restrictions. It's like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that because of paperwork. And like, for a lot of my time in Australia, especially when I started my kind of creative career, I was on a bridging visa. So while waiting for my permanent residency, technically I could work. Problem is no one would hire me because no one understood what a bridging visa was. And that's why, I mentioned earlier about being so hamstrung. A lot of that was because everything was so tied to permanent residency or citizenship. And like, I still had to file my taxes. I had to pay, if I was getting no money back, couldn't get the grants my arts peers were taking for granted, couldn't, only had to work on like the money I had. And I was just lucky my family has enough money that I could like live off them even now. Otherwise I'd be stuck. And I ended up having to build a very like ad hoc portfolio somehow, because I was just like, I want to be determined to like do things, even though I'm so restricted what I can do, but still manage to do a lot of things anyway. But because it's not conventional, I find it really hard to get any sort of job in Australia because some reason they don't understand like transferable skills. Like even in the games industry here, it's like, oh, you don't know if you're a games person. No, we don't have like the traditional pathway. Like how am I supposed to get a traditional pathway? But I remember like going to the US and I went there as an international student and doing an MFA, but that was mostly so I could be in San Francisco for longer than 3 months. And they didn't like so many things there are not dependent on your visa status. And I don't know if it is a Bay Area thing or US thing, but there was so much more options for funding and opportunities that I could partake in that just needed me to be in the US at the time. I didn't care how I was in the US.
I think that
like you're just here. And like I was getting much more job interviews for stuff that would have been outside my station, despite my weird degree and despite my sort of ad hoc background. Like that's how I got started more honestly in games, was in the Bay Area. There was like a lot more easier pathways to get in, and I managed to like build a good portfolio that way. And it was just unfortunately because of visa reasons I couldn't stay. Although I guess now I dodged a bullet. But it was just sort of a trip to come back to Melbourne with my permanent residency now. But that hasn't necessarily changed all that much for me. Like my path on the bridging visa and everything I had to do to compensate for it, it still haunts me to this day. And I've only just, even with games where you think like, oh, you know, this industry of all industries should understand like people having like unusual backgrounds and respect transferable skills. Like on the one hand, it was one of the easiest circles to break into when I moved to Melbourne. Like the people there were a little bit more welcoming and it was easier to get to know people. But at the same time, like jobs wise, it's still so hard. It's still so hard to like make a case for yourself if you don't come from like, oh, you've worked with the AAA, or you've done this and that, and you've made this many games, and you know you have this very specific skills like no one has used for a performance artist, writer, shenanigans type, you know?
So let's try to like shift a more positive note. Like, so is there a time where you feel like giving up, but what keeps you going?
A fair few of us work together and have worked together in the past. I can definitely point out, like, for example, Amber and Amani are responsible for me not giving up lots of times, you know. And I think that we probably have a lot of little webs if we wanted to draw a diagram in this chat. But yeah, it often is community and the spaces that we make, and people who you can reach out in all different time zones, especially. That strength and that like, can you just write what I should reply to this douchebag, please? You know, because I just want to rip their head off. But
like Maize said, like things with like not feeling like I'm qualified for my position kind of thing. I really struggle with that kind of thing. I haven't even finished my degree yet, and here I am working a job. Like I don't even know what's happening. But every time I speak to community during my consultations, they get really excited about seeing the culture in this new form and just knowing how that can like have a little effect. It can like in so many different ways as well. It's like if it is successful, you know, all these kids get to see representation, non-Indigenous people get to experience Indigenous culture, Indigenous people get to see their culture, Indigenous people like us who haven't had access to their culture get a little bit of taste of that. And just like thinking all those little things get me really excited, and that definitely like helps me keep going.
I felt like giving up a lot of times. Okay, most of the times but I channeled into more like, what can I change instead of giving up? A lot of times at the beginning was because, I mean, this was something new-ish, like there wasn't really an organized game development community. And I mean, people expect like huge success stories all the time. And I mean, I was working in a tech space, and there I was also learning things about, you know, business models and all that stuff. And I was trying to I couldn't see how to run the community as a business, even though they were helping me try to see that, but it was just a lot. And especially when I came to South Africa and my community was in Zambia, and I was trying to run it with people who didn't have the same passion as me. Like people would say, okay, we'll do this, I'll help you with this, and then they'll just go off the radar and never hear from them again. And I'm like, oh my God. And like I've had so many moments like that. And yes, like that's kind of why I changed like strategy completely, because I'm like, also, by the way, hosting workshops is so stressful. It's especially without resources, like trying to do zero budget workshops or really low budget workshops, it was too stressful. And I was also the facilitator of all my workshops, so organizing, and I'm then too tired to do things. So I was like, look, let me look at what I can change, think about what's manageable while I'm at university and all that stuff. And yeah, so rather than giving up, I try to change strategies. And what motivates me is the fact that if I stop, like, no one else is going to pick it up. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I just like I can't stop. I just don't feel like I stop. And also, I really have a passion for it. Like, I don't know. I just, if I stop, then who will do it? That's what I feel like, kind of. Yeah.
I also feel like that, like you can't stop. You just can't stop.
So, yeah, they're like, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome, but as Tiara typed into the chat, it absolutely is victim blaming bullshit. It's like, what the hell is wrong with these privileged white cis men who think they can do things that they can't, and everybody believes them? What is wrong with our society, honestly? But yeah, I guess in terms of how we're supporting each other and how and that sort of thing, and how we're surviving this difficult time. One thing that helps is that I intrinsically enjoy the process of making games. It's not just a career for me. It's more important than a career. It's how I express myself, and capitalism isn't going to take that away from me. I hope. It's a rough time, but we're getting through it.
I feel like sometimes quitting is a good thing. I got harassed I was teaching game audio at universities in Melbourne for 4 years. And it was a career path for me. It was shit, there's not many game audio teachers at a bachelor's level around the world. I'm one of the first. I can designing whole courses. I could really see this through and have a stable career. And then, Gamergate is still happening, and getting harassed out of my job was a thing that happened. But my self-esteem is so much better. And the energy that I have, the respect for myself and everyone around me, I couldn't imagine where I am now. Also earning a lot more than I was teaching. So, I mean, that's not hard. But you would think in games maybe it was hard, but no, even games gets paid more than teaching. So, yeah, I think... I mean, I couldn't know it at the time, but I wish that we could identify when maybe quitting is the better option. But it's so hard. I think it's probably impossible, actually.
Yeah, when we were talking about feeling like we're the only ones doing it, we need to keep going, even how difficult it is. It's still so important to look after ourselves, because if we burn out quickly and there's no one to take our spot, then it's gone. Exactly. So, like May said, knowing when to maybe not even quit completely, but knowing when to switch it up, and Sithe was saying, taking what you have and making it easier for you, but still achieving something that you want to. I think learning to do those things is also really important.
Yeah, I have an ADHD coach that I talk to every couple of weeks to a month, and I was telling her the last appointment we had was talking about. I was talking about earlier about just applying to things in 5 minutes, and somehow those work out better for me. And she was saying that, it's actually good to sometimes I feel a little bit guilty. This worked out easier than the stuff I spent 100 hours on. What the hell? And she was now seems to be the time to celebrate the easy wins. And something that might seem easy to you could actually be hard for other people, but you don't necessarily feel like it's hard, because you sort of enjoy something, or you're it comes to you naturally. So the hardness doesn't necessarily come up as a factor. So she was hey, don't feel bad that this was too easy. If right now the thing you want to aim, don't feel bad that you don't want to work on super hard stuff right now. A pandemic, B, everything's turned itself inside out. But if you want to just aim for the easy stuff right now, go for it. If it keeps you motivated, if it keeps you happy, no, who cares that it took you 1 second and it didn't take you a lot of effort? Great, cool. You find another thing to celebrate for your day. And that's what I've been doing. This is the small, easy wins, but it's something, you know?
Find your inner strength and try to be as creative as you can. It's hard for me. Sometimes for me, it's like to keep a discipline because I am in a lot of things. But we have to keep trying.
On another positive note, is there any advice that you want to give to the younger generation or even you when you were younger? Like, what is something that you felt like you needed to hear?
Just sign up for stuff. No, sorry, go on.
Stop blaming yourself. Self-confidence, always.
Pay attention.
Go on, Squinky.
Yeah. Pay attention to how other people make you feel and how they treat you and how they act when they think nobody is watching. Like, I'm not saying, like, don't refuse to trust anyone because you need allies. You need, you need friends. You need people, like, you need other people to survive. But just be really careful about who you trust.
I suppose everyone else, your enemies are going to shoot for you. You don't need to do it for them. It's like a surprisingly overlooked thing that I think you need a lot of data to learn intrinsically. But it's really important.
Yeah, maybe I want to add on the giving up. I think that's a thing I would have given to myself in terms of sometimes it's not useful to keep on banging your head against the wall, like to be mindful about where your energy goes and protecting your energy and be mindful about who you put your energy towards and what you put your energy towards. That's something I would give myself and younger generations, I think.
Something that I still need to tell myself now is that the work that we do is valid. No have like big or small, like we feel it is contributing, it's still really valid in what you're doing. So keep doing it.
Some advice I'd give to my previous, my younger self, would be to just pick your battles. You can't win everything, and so understand where to spend your effort and pick the things that matter to you instead of the things that matter to the people around you.
Like Phoebe was saying earlier, if community organizers are constantly burning themselves out, that's work that you can't do later. So really learn to take breaks and protect your time. And if that thing, if a deadline has to be moved or if that thing is responded to tomorrow instead of today, that's okay. Rest. Take rest.
And I'll read Amber's. Okay, she says, occupy your space and your feelings are valid and important. So good.
Just advice I would give myself is really to trust myself, to trust my own instincts. Sometimes this is I don't know, and that's okay. That's an instinct too. But building a relationship of trust with yourself is so important. So even if, let's say, instincts are wrong, it's still important to trust yourself. And this is how you develop kind of a really good relationship with yourself and a good trust with yourself. And it's easier. It's easier for me to engage with the rest of the world from a place of self-trust.
Sort of vaguely yelled it earlier, but to clarify my point about signing up for stuff, I'm just remembering how my teenage self, in some ways, they were much better about just doing things because why not? I wrote an entire musical at 16. Not no one ever told me what a musical was supposed to be like, but I sort of make ideas it's a script and people sing in it, but this is a story. Cool, I'll write one. No, never wrote one before, or I wrote a game which was a choose your own adventure / Savage Garden fan fiction. random trivia. And like, no one was there to tell me otherwise. And I just did, because that sounded like a fun idea. Sure. And then you get to the point where you're like, you know too much about how things are meant to work. It's like, I don't know, it's meant to be this way. Or you get like sort of, I have this big idea, but I don't know how to make it happen, because I know now how people make it happen. I don't know, I could go that way. But now it's just been like, in the past decade, like the one time I actually did a New Year's resolution, like a decade ago, was like, sign up to anything that looks interesting, even if it seems like out of my depth. And that's actually how like my creative career steamrolled, was that philosophy. I was like, this looks like fun. I have no idea if I'm qualified for this, or I've never done this before, but I'll try. And I went to my first game jam, pitched a game about immigration, because I got tired of Papers, Please and wanted a Papers, Please from the other side. And somehow that game, first ever game I really properly made, got super viral and raised so much money for immigration charities that people know me for that game. It's just like this stuff. I think my teenage self at the right age is like, that looks cool, sure. So advise everyone else, if it looks cool, just go for it. Don't overthink it. Just see what happens. It's an adventure. If it doesn't work out, great. If it does work out, great. If it works out the way you didn't expect, even better.
Could you drop a link to that? Because that sounds amazing.
Oh yes, I also want to that, yeah.
So the game is called Here's Your Fucking Papers. And it's basically a bunch of very annoying puzzles about immigration. Like me and these two other people, like I did sort of the content and two other people did the coding, and it was part of the GamerX game jam in San Francisco. So our first proper actual game jam, made this game, and it got weirdly popular. And it was actually how I saw games could be amazing, because I'd been talking about immigration my whole life and made art about it, written about it. People are always like, oh, that seems really bad. Like, oh, I feel for you, but no one really understood. Then I demoed this game, and everyone's faces when they see the one maze puzzle we had where you had to escort a piece of paperwork that was lagging behind you so slowly it kept getting stuck behind walls. So you had to go back and pick it up again. Everyone's faces was like, oh my God. Oh, you get it now. You get the pain of immigration because you feel it in this very annoying puzzle game. That was like, oh my God, there is something to this game's business. But yeah, just because I went to a game jam, I'm like, sure, why not?
Follow what makes you happy, especially in Africa, because a lot of people, especially parents, especially people older than you, will tell you to do this, do that. Even your friends might tell you to do that. But only you know what makes you truly happy. Just as an example, when I was in high school, I looked into a book and saw a course for multimedia engineering, and I thought it was really cool because it was about game development. But my teachers never encouraged that. They encouraged me to get into engineering because they're like, oh, we need more women engineers and all that stuff. And you have good math and physics grade. But my brother even laughs at me about this, but I get scared to switch on a plug in the house. I get scared of being shocked. So I'm like, how did these people think I would be good at engineering and electrical engineering or whatever? But anyway, but now I've come back after beginning a course in engineering and switching to computer science and getting more involved in game communities. Finally, what made me happy has come back. And I wouldn't say I regret the path I've taken, but just that more people should just follow what makes them happy.
I think also don't pay attention to how you're feeling, from the way people are treating you. And also think about how your energy is going.
Mine is tell my younger self to be brave, not perfect.
Yes.
Because growing up, I hate it. I hate the term model minority because that gives you so much pressure growing up. That's I hate that. And that's how you were raised, that you have to be perfect or you have to be the top of your class. If I were to go back to my younger self, it's just forget that. Just do the things you love and don't care about what people think. Sort of ending on a more positive note. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today.